Ever since the word dinosauria was used to describe the bones of terrifying prehistoric lizards in 1841 by Sir Richard Owen, the idea of these creatures has enchanted the imagination of the public. You might have heard of the Crystal Palace, an impressive iron and glass structure that premiered at the Great Exhibition of 1851 in Hyde Park in London. The structure exhibited the progress that came with the Industrial Revolution, not just through its actual displays, but through the structure itself, as a building like this wouldn't have been possible without industrial technology. After the conclusion of the exhibition, the structure was demolished and rebuilt in southeast London at a site named Crystal Palace Park in 1854. While it was the main attraction, the park also contained gardens and statues, and, most important to this video, 15 recreations of extinct prehistoric animals, arranged in what is called the Dinosaur Court. While these figures were crude, and inaccurately represent the animals that we know of today, this is, to my knowledge, the first dinosaur attraction to ever exist, and having captured the imagination of the public, is still around even today. Between 1877 and 1892, a surge of fossil discovery in Colorado, Nebraska, and Wyoming was led by two paleontologists, Othniel C. Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope. This period of intense digging and study was known as the Bone Wars, named so because of the intense and unethical competition between the two men. Not only did they slander each other in public to get their rival academic funding pooled, but they would also actively sabotage each other's crews and work sites, destroying fossils in the pursuit of glory. While financially ruined at the end, both men did contribute greatly to discovery in the field of paleontology, and with their findings, public interest rose significantly. As time went on, dinosaurs began to appear more frequently in literature, and with the invention of motion pictures, the public was able to view dinosaurs visually on a mass scale, only working to further that interest in something so alien to the modern world. However, for the 1964 New York World's Fair, Disney designed a ride for the Ford Motor Company known as Ford's Magic Skyway, which took you back in time through both the Ice Age and the prehistoric world to encounter the dinosaurs, which were modeled off of the Rite of Spring segment from Fantasia. Quickly, at the conclusion of the fair, the dinosaurs were moved to the Disneyland Railroad in 1966, where you can still see them today in an exhibit known as the Primeval World. Later, with the opening of Epcot in 1982, the Universum of Energy was an attraction that featured similar figures, but built to a larger scale, tying into the theme of energy and covering the origin of fossil fuels, which, really, was just an excuse to showcase these magnificent creatures in what was a stunning ride for its time. However, while public interest in dinosaurs had lulled in the mid-19th century, a revival in the field of paleontology in the late 80s led to renewed exposure of the subject, resulting in iconic media such as 1988's The Land Before Time, the early 90s sitcom Dinosaurs, which also happened to have a brief show in Disney MGM Studios, and of course, the incredibly popular 1993 film Jurassic Park, solidifying public interest still even up through today. In the world of theme parks, this triggered the development of 1996's Jurassic Park The Ride at Universal Hollywood, which, through its immense success, resulted in the incorporation of an entire Jurassic Park land into Islands of Adventure, which opened in 1999. To compete, Disney rushed to beat its opening with its own dinosaur-themed land and ride, with the opening of Dinoland USA in Animal Kingdom in 1998. And while I've told this story before with a lot more detail and context, I just wanted to highlight how public interest in dinosaurs resulted in some of the best theme park attractions ever made. Even today, Universal is still leading public interest with the Jurassic World films, which, while not spectacular, are still resulting in some of the world's best rides. There's even an attraction currently traveling country to country known as Jurassic World the Exhibition, which features animatronic dinosaur scenes and is something that I recently saw in London. The city has definitely come a long way since the Crystal Palace dinosaurs. You probably know all about dinosaur theme park attractions though, especially if you watch my channel often. So today, I instead wanted to cover something different. I wanted to highlight the dinosaur rides and attractions that you probably haven't heard of, because with the revival of dinosaur popularity in the late 80s, there were a lot of rides that premiered that looked suspiciously similar to Disney's Universum of Energy. This period also saw the prevalence of traveling animatronic dinosaur exhibits that made their way around the United States. And even more broadly, I want to talk about other dinosaur attractions and even restaurants. Outside of your classic Disney dinosaur rides, and Universal's Jurassic Park and Jurassic World, there's a lot more out there than you would probably think. And so today, I wanted to talk about the dinosaur side of themed entertainment. Have you ever heard about Dinosaur World, which is located between Orlando and Tampa in Florida? It's a weird, kitschy roadside attraction. And hey, good news. I already covered it in its own video a few years ago. In researching dinosaur-themed exhibits and rides, I found that there was quite a lot out there, to the point of being overwhelming. These kinds of videos take a lot of time to research and put together, so if you'd like to support the effort that I put into this channel, I would just appreciate it if you left a like on the video and subscribed if you haven't already. To start, the first ride that I want to cover is something very popular that many people have been asking me to talk about for years. In 1975, Knott's Berry Farm opened a legendary dark ride known as Knott's Berry Tales. Designed by famous Disney Imagineer Raleigh Crump, the ride took park guests through an enchanting, boysenberry-themed journey alongside magical critters. But unfortunately, the ride was relatively short-lived, closing in October of 1986. Just 7 months later, its replacement opened to the public as Kingdom of the Dinosaurs, another well-loved attraction that seems to be wildly popular among people who often comment on my videos. The queue was rather simple, but through overhead signs, told the story of a character from 1920s Los Angeles named Professor Wells, a reference to H.G. Wells, who invents a time machine. On reaching the station and boarding the vehicle, riders move into Professor Wells' laboratory and startle the man as he shouts in confusion. Asking what you're all doing in his lab, he exclaims that the time machine is still running, and despite his protests, riders comedically move through the portal and back in time. Traveling into the dark, riders witness time reverse by 20,000 years into the past, as they encounter the backwards progression of humanity, which was depicted with images revealed through lights. Emerging out into the first scene, it depicts a primitive tribe roasting meat over a fire and taking refuge from the outside world in the shelter of the cave. Moving through the wilderness, riders hear the howling of wolves off in the distance, and moving right into an ambush as the wolves attack an elk, the sound of crackling electricity signals that they're now traveling even further back in time. With a voiceover of the professor exclaiming that you're now traveling back 60,000 years to the Ice Age, the vehicles now emerge out into a frozen world, and immediately encounter a terrifying but gentle giant sloth eating from a tree. Moving on to the next scene, a woolly mammoth is seen on the left as the vehicle passes under its trunk, and another mammoth is struggling and drowning in a body of water, as a nearby roaring saber-toothed tiger reveals that it stumbled in out of fear while being hunted. Passing around the back of the first mammoth, riders move into a cave where they yet again travel back through time. Encountering a giant scorpion, the professor informs riders that they're now 300 million years in the past. The next segment of the ride just moves through a cave and out into an overgrown jungle, but encountering a clock up in the trees, the professor proclaims that he's taking control and is sending you back up through time, now progressing only 250 million years away. Moving now through the Triassic period, the vehicles move past a Dimetrodon, and yes, before you bring it up in the comments, I know that it's not classified as a dinosaur. An interesting note about the ride is that if it goes down, a narrator chimed in and started to share information about the dinosaurs that you would see coming up, which was very helpful in naming what riders would encounter next. Moving on to the first actual dinosaur, you witness an ornithomimist looking out from the foliage. Passing by two animals on the right, it doesn't describe what they are, but continuing on, you next encounter a Stegosaurus, which the narrator describes as having a brain the size of a walnut. Another encounter on the right reveals a herd of Triceratops, and standing over a lava pit nearby is a Tyrannosaurus Rex, which roars at the sky as what I believe is a pterodactyl flies overhead. It's an epic little scene for such a small, confined ride, and after passing by an erupting volcano in the distance, you encounter a few sauropods, although I'm not clear on exactly what species they're intended to be, as the dialogue was too difficult to hear. Traveling through another cave with another time-traveling electricity effect, the bones of extinct dinosaurs reveal your passage through time, and as the professor declares that you're back, the vehicle rounds the corner for an abrupt conclusion as you emerge out to the ride station. Unfortunately, Kingdom of the Dinosaurs closed in 2004, but it was an excellent atmospheric ride that hit the appropriate tones just right. From the wacky, eccentric voice lines of the professor,
"What incarnation is happening? What are you doing in my laboratory? My time machine is on! No! Go back! You're going back in time! The time machine!"
to the atmospheric music and roars of Dinosaurs in the Dark, Kingdom of the Dinosaurs was a classic that stood on its own, despite being very clearly inspired by Ford's Magic Skyway and the Universum der Energie. This was a great attraction for a park like Knott's Berry Farm with its smaller budget, and I understand why everyone wanted me to cover this ride so badly, because it's really high quality for the time that it existed for something that wasn't built by Disney. One thing that I found really impressive about Jurassic World the exhibition is that it tries to sell you an immersive experience, as if you're really walking the park and seeing different dinosaur exhibits. There's even a moment towards the end where you're trying to get through a locked gate, but surprise, a Carnotaurus rises from behind the fence and begins to hungrily eye up the park guests. The commotion then attracts the attention of a T-Rex, which wanders out from the other direction, and the two dinos begin to roar in an aggressive standoff, with you, the guest, stuck in between. The technology used in the exhibit is very impressive, and notably, is quite theatrical, which is unlike any other traveling dinosaur exhibit that I've ever seen. I think that traveling dinosaur animatronics is an interesting subject though. It is something that you might have stumbled across inside of a zoo, museum, or even a mall. They're never anything like the Jurassic World attraction, as they're always more of a showcase, often with an educational angle, rather than a thrilling, immersive experience. But they've been around for over 60 years, and you've likely encountered something like this at least once in your life. The first instance of a dinosaur exhibit with moving figures, that I could find at least, actually goes back to the 1964 New York World's Fair. An exhibit known as Dinoland was put on by Sinclair Oil, which allowed guests to walk among a garden of rudimentary animatronic dinosaurs, with each family receiving a voucher for 1 free gallon of gasoline. While certainly less impressive than Disney's ride for the Ford Pavilion, the exhibit was still notably exciting for its time. Moving forward to 1982, I want to look at a company known as Dinamation International Corporation. It was founded by an airline pilot named Chris Mays, who had the idea to lease dinosaur robots from a Japanese company known as Kokoro. Initially premiering in museums, which boosted attendance, it was very profitable for both the museums and Dinamation. The novelty quickly wore off within a few years, as the figures were criticized for being scientifically inaccurate. Starting in 1985, Dinamation premiered its own figures built in-house, with the company advertising its collaboration with notable paleontologists and showing off its art and engineering teams to establish a reputation for high-quality creatures that more accurately represented real dinosaurs. Still, many museums rejected the exhibits, feeling that a lot of creative liberties were taken with the figures, but Dinamation did expand its business to zoos and malls, growing quickly in the late 80s. By the early 90s, it appeared that new and expanding exhibits had been marketed with the name Dinosaurs Alive, but the company was reported to be in financial trouble as the novelty was wearing off and not drawing in nearly as many people. There was also a lot of speculation from news outlets that with the cultural phenomenon that was Jurassic Park, audiences now looked at the Dinamation animatronics as dated, which contributed to the loss of interest from the public. There are corporate videos showcasing how the company began to move in other directions, including an exhibit on whales and prehistoric aquatic reptiles. There was also a showcase in development of an exhibit of Ice Age mammals known as prehistoric giants, and another program was called Rainforest Insects, which would be depicted through giant animatronics. The company even experimented with an attraction known as Zoology of the Future, showcasing what I can only describe as monstrous abominations. None of these programs seemed to get anywhere other than a rare few figures that sometimes made appearances, but the hundreds of dinosaur animatronics were absolutely everywhere by the late 90s as the company continued to struggle financially. Finally, in 2001, they went out of business, with many of the figures either sitting abandoned in their California warehouse, or still residing wherever they were released, with Wonderworks apparently having the most sizable collection at the time. I wish there was more information on the history of Dinamation available, but this reminded me of a 1994 exhibit that came to both SeaWorld Cleveland and Orlando, which I did cover briefly in my video on the comprehensive history of the Florida location. Known as Monster Marsh, this temporary walking trail featured a variety of ferocious dinosaurs, which I highly suspect came from Dinamation, as I don't think there was an equivalent company at the time. However, since Dinamation went out of business, many other similar companies have taken its place, with animatronic dinosaurs still being quite popular throughout zoos and museums even today. A newer company called Dinosaurs Unearthed leases out its figures for a similar type of exhibit that recycles the name Dinosaurs Alive, and if you visited a Cedar Fair park in the 2010s, chances are you may have seen some of these figures, as they were featured throughout many of the parks starting in 2012, with most removed by 2018 or 2019, depending on the contract with the park. There's not a lot to say about animatronic dinosaur exhibits, because there just isn't much information on them, but Dinamation had a strong presence throughout the 80s and 90s, and helped establish a niche part of the entertainment industry that we still see around today. A few years ago, I produced a video where I covered the old and defunct animatronic attractions of Phantasialand, and I made a brief mention there about the park's monorail, known as the Phantasialand Jet. It moved around the park for scenic views, but at one point, it entered an artificial cliff structure, where riders were transported back to the Ice Age. They first encounter a woolly mammoth, which was being hunted by early cave-dwelling people, and the scene then transitions to life in the cave. Moving back in time even further, riders encounter dinosaurs and other prehistoric creatures, and while I've covered this segment in more depth in that previous video, I thought it was worth mentioning to reinforce the theme for this one. With the Ice Age and prehistoric scenes, it was also clearly inspired by Ford's Magic Skyway, just like with Kingdom of the Dinosaurs. Another attraction I already covered in depth was the Dawn of Time, which was located in the building at the base of the Blackpool Tower. To summarize, the ride took you through the evolution of prehistoric life, with a large segment that focused on dinosaurs, all of which is described through a dry, comedic tone from the narrator. Later in the ride, it progresses through time to the Ice Age, where riders encounter both a woolly mammoth and saber-toothed tiger. While there was more to the attraction after these scenes, and it is mostly a linear progression along the evolution of life, I still don't think that it would have existed without preceding popular attractions like Ford's Magic Skyway and the Universum of Energie. Another attraction I've briefly spoken about before is Madame Freudenreich Curiosities at Europa Park, a strange dinosaur ride about a woman who takes care of the creatures as they leisure around her garden. It's an incredibly bizarre concept, but is a 2018 retheme of an older ride from 1994 known as Universum der Energie. You don't need to speak German to know what inspired this attraction, and while I glossed over it previously, I figured that it was a good fit for this video. The short queue for the attraction thematically conveyed what I believe is the geological evolution of the Earth, and as you moved in further, there was a room with what looked to be equipment storage for a dig site where fossils are being uncovered. As you progressed down another hallway, fossils on the walls reinforced the theme, and coming to the load station, riders boarded an Omnimover. At one point, the ride apparently had a stop-motion dinosaur film in the queue, which I would have guessed explains why you're going back in time, but it was removed in 2004, and so you just immediately go back to the prehistoric era with no other context. After first encountering a Dimetrodon, you look to your right and see the massive body of some unknown creature. After rounding the corner, it's revealed to have been a sauropod overlooking its nest, although I'm not sure what species it's intended to be. Maybe someone watching can try to guess based on its design, but the depictions of the dinosaurs on the ride were often so awkward and crude that I don't think that it really matters. Moving on into the left, the ride vehicle moves towards a Parasaurolophus that looks out from the trees, and just past this, there are small volcanic vents with another dinosaur standing further back, with my guess being that it's an Ornithomimus. At first, I thought that I wasn't understanding what I was seeing, but riders next encounter birds, as in just regular birds, and moving past a rock wall with a projected waterfall effect, the ride vehicles then circle around a long scene that features a Stegosaurus. Progressing into the dark, moving shadows depict what I believe are small dinosaurs jumping overhead, and encountering a lava pit, the extremely pointy head of a pterodactyl cranes out from the darkness. After a quick trip through more dark scenes, riders suddenly encounter an ugly, carnivorous creature with a spiked head, though I have no good guess at what this could be. The ride immediately passes by a Triceratops, and another pterodactyl that sits above its babies in the nest. Emerging out from behind a short rock, the ride now showcases the world's two most awkward T-Rex figures. You next encounter a third carnivore which pokes its head out from the bushes on the left, which sits above two crocodilians in a body of water. And then, that's it. The ride ends as abruptly as it started, as you exit through themed mineshaft tunnels to the outside. Was Europa Park's Universum der Energie interesting? Yes. Was it a good ride? I would say no, because that looked like an absolute mess, and it seems like there was really no reason for it to exist, other than as a blatant ripoff of the Epcot attraction. Its awkward dinosaur figures all smashed into a small basement certainly made for an intriguing experience, but I think it's much better off with its re-theme, which leans into the weirdness to create something quite unique. The Natural History Museum in London has stood since 1881, and throughout its history has been home to many dinosaur bones and fossils. Contributing to the theme of this video, the Dinosaur Hall notably contains a few animatronics, with its T-Rex being the most interesting through its large size. Appropriately, the museum also contains an eatery known as the T-Rex Restaurant, which only has light theming inside, but does have two animatronics posed as if fighting, which is a fun little element. That's really all there is to it, but it raised the question, how many other dinosaur-themed restaurants are out there? To my surprise, I actually found very little, but there are two that are worth talking about. The first one was brought up by a channel watcher, Knight of Arconia, years ago on my Adrenaline video, and I've been trying to find a way to talk about it ever since. They suggested a never-built restaurant concept called Dino Quizine, which would have been contained in a domed structure which was accessed through a covered staircase from the outside, not unlike a Planet Hollywood. While the restaurant itself appeared to have a stationary bar and lounge, its main attraction was that you ate on a moving ride vehicle with a circular table in the middle. The ride itself would cycle through various prehistoric scenes of animatronic dinosaurs or thematically adjacent creatures, with environments ranging from underwater to dense jungle and to the peaks of mountains. Each vehicle would have been equipped with a touchscreen where diners could order food or otherwise did dinosaur trivia to earn points, hence why the restaurant name Dino Quizine was spelled with a Q. I think that maybe the idea for the restaurant wasn't something that made financial sense, so I see why it wasn't built, but the concept at least seemed worth a try. However, while I couldn't find much in the way of other dinosaur restaurants, there is one notable enterprise that stands out through its theming. In 2008, the Walt Disney World version of Downtown Disney saw the premiere of T-Rex Cafe, and while much has changed since the area became Disney Springs, the restaurant is still around to be enjoyed for its theming. After walking under the dinosaur skeleton and into the rock facade, you're greeted with a massive animatronic T-Rex with two smaller T-Rex babies standing at her feet. Adjacent to them is the gift shop, which through its starry ceiling and hanging planets, seems to take on what I would describe as a natural science theme. Walking into the restaurant itself, the first section you'll notice is the bar area with its aquatic motif, which actually extends into a dining room. One of the first animatronics you'll encounter is a woolly mammoth, and the other sections of the restaurant seem to be divided into three distinct themes. By the kitchen, pterodactyls fly over what I believe is a volcanic area, and behind the mammoth, the next dining section is themed to ice, with a T-Rex skeleton trapped inside. The main dining area of the restaurant is themed to a jungle, and here you encounter numerous animatronic dinosaurs. One of the cleverest elements is a booth built into a Triceratops, and if any of this reminds you of a rainforest cafe, well, that's because that's essentially what it is. T-Rex Cafe was conceptualized as a spin-off restaurant concept, and shares many of the same elements. For example, in Rainforest Cafe, when it simulates a storm every 10 minutes, as the lights dim and strobes simulate lightning, the animatronic animals begin to move and make noise in response. T-Rex Cafe does something similar, although it's a meteor crash instead. And like Rainforest Cafe, the food has a reputation for being downright awful, although I can't say that I've ever eaten here, so I also cannot judge. Even so, I think that the idea is really fun, with a lot of prehistoric creatures to help create the atmosphere. So, while there aren't really any other dinosaur-themed restaurants out there, T-Rex Cafe at least makes up for it with its really strong theming. In the past, I've spoken about the Grand Slam Canyon theme park at Circus Circus in Las Vegas, and while the emphasis then was how it fit into 1990s trends and design, for this video, the focus is of course on the dinosaurs. The park opens with 8 of them, each with their own informational placard, and that's it. They were just a novelty. They were eventually removed, and as the park evolved, it was renamed to the Adventure Dome. When I went to my community tab on YouTube and asked everyone for more dinosaur-themed rides and attractions for this video, there were a lot of great suggestions. However, there was so much that it became overwhelming, and so for this segment, I want to finish out the video by mentioning smaller dinosaur attractions that there's not much to say about, but are at least worth highlighting as being marginally interesting. First, a few people suggested river caves at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. And while I covered this in a video about the park's dark rides a few years ago, it is still worth pointing out how strange it is, with the weird dinosaur figures sitting alongside Neanderthals. There's also the popular Jurassic Jungle boat ride in Pigeon Forge, although I want to avoid talking about it, as I eventually want to do a video on the kitsch attractions that surround Dollywood, but it at least makes a mention here, because how could I not? In 1993, a park in Japan known as UNESCO Village was converted into a dinosaur exhibit, which was then renamed as the Great Dinosaur Exhibition. The park contained a boat ride which took you through various dinosaur scenes, and honestly, I'm impressed for something that opened in the early 90s and wasn't Disney. The sets are well designed with a lot of depth, and the movement of the dinosaurs is far more sophisticated than even a lot of what you'll see today. My first impression of the ride is very positive, so maybe I'll make a dedicated video covering it one day. The next attraction comes from the Wildwoods Boardwalk in New Jersey, which used to have a dinosaur dark ride called Escape from Dinosaur Beach that ran briefly from 1995 and through 1998. Manufactured by R&R Creative Amusement Designs, there's almost no documentation out there other than a few low-quality images from the website of its manufacturer. It seems like a ride that was meant for kids, but it still appeared to be atmospheric and somewhat interesting. Moving on, there is another popular attraction that was mentioned by many people, and it's a dinosaur-themed raft slide known as Voyage to the Center of the Earth, located at Waterworld in Denver. Moving into a cave, not only is this the world's most spectacularly themed water park attraction, but it brings you close up to dinosaur animatronics. That's incredible, so I have no idea how I haven't heard about this before people brought it up. While I mentioned Dinosaur World in Florida earlier in the video, there are a fair number of attractions with static dinosaur statues that might be considered similar. However, in Natural Bridge, Virginia, there's a park called Dinosaur Kingdom 2, which is based around the wild concept of incorporating dinosaurs into the American Civil War. It's all static statues, but the idea was crazy enough that it gets a highlight. The next suggestion mentions the closed Tivoli World in Spain, which contained a ride known as Dinolandia. Just a quick strobe warning as I talk about this, but the attraction was designed as a pretzel-style dark ride, and boarding the vehicle, you move into the darkness. Now finding yourself in a colorful prehistoric world, the ride attempted to terrorize you as it flashed strobes on dinosaur statues in the dark. The ride is best described as pathetic, because other than its shockingly short 45-second ride cycle, it's just so comedically unserious, making it a great example of theme park kitsch. There were a lot of other great suggestions made for this video, so I appreciate everyone who contributed, but there's just so much dinosaur-themed stuff out there that it's difficult to really cover it all. If you follow Attractions 360 on YouTube, they've recently been posting a lot of POVs of dinosaur-themed rides from Southeast Asia over the past year, and through their videos, I learned about Phantasialand Dino Kingdom, an entire dinosaur theme park that opened in China in June of 2022. Dinosaurs, not just in theme parks but also in museums, zoos, and other exhibits, are obviously immensely popular and capture the public imagination, just as when they first did in 1854 at Crystal Palace Park. There's a lot that's interesting about the video subject, but if there's one big highlight that I took away from this, it's just how good Kingdom of the Dinosaurs was at Knott's Berry Farm. People have been asking me to cover that for years, and I can see why, but now here at the end of the video, hopefully everything else that I mentioned to talk about was interesting as well. A lot of work goes into making these types of videos, so if you'd like to support this one, you can do me a favor by just simply leaving a like if you haven't already done so. As always, if you enjoy videos like these and want to see more, I also recommend hitting the subscribe button with bell notification, so as to be alerted to new videos as they're released.